Hey there, class. Today we're going to continue our discussion on inequalities. We're going to move on, just like we did with solving equations, to multi-step inequalities, where we're doing more than one step at a time. And what you need to know, we need to recall the order of operations, all right? Because just like when solving equations, we're going to use them in the reverse order. We need to think about combining like terms. We need to recall what distribution means. We have to go through the process. We have to re-go through the same process for solving equations, except with our one minor difference, which is if you multiply or divide an inequality by a negative number, make sure you flip the sign. That is the main difference between equations and inequalities. So much of the same here. I just wanted you to remember, always flip the inequality if you divide or multiply by a negative number in the solving process. And remember that the steps are the same as they are for solving multi-step equations, and the first thing you want to do is distribute. After you've distributed everything in the problem, you want to combine like terms. Next, you want to get variables on the same side of the inequality. Remember, because sometimes there's variables on each side of that equal sign when we're solving for equations. Well, there could be variables on each side of the inequality also. Then we want to follow the reverse order of operations in order to isolate that variable. So let's take a look at a few examples. The first example we have here is 9 plus 4t is greater than 21. Well, there's no distributing going on here, and there's not any like terms to combine. So we're going to move on to doing the reverse order of operations, which tells us that we need to undo addition and subtraction first. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract this 9 from both sides. After I subtract the 9, I'm left with 4t is greater than 21, or sorry, is greater than 12. And remember, I didn't flip the sign, I subtracted 9. I didn't multiply or divide by a negative. Once I have here, I undo this multiplication by dividing 4 from both sides, so that these 4's cancel, and I'm just left with 2 is greater than 3. This next problem here, I want to distribute first. Don't have it. I don't have any like terms to combine. Again, so I move to undoing addition and subtraction. Well, in this problem, I'm subtracting 7 from the A term. So then I need to add 7. I need to do the opposite to move it to the other side of the inequality. So now I have negative 6a is less than or equal to 24. My next step is to divide, because I have to undo the multiplication, and I'm going to divide by negative 6. A light should have gone off in your head. I said divide by a negative. When we're working with inequalities and we divide or multiply by a negative, we need to flip the sign. So while these negative 6's cancel out, this becomes greater than or equal to negative 4. So A is greater than or equal to negative 4. Finally, we have this last problem. Remember, we always want to distribute first. In this case, we actually do have something to distribute. We're going to distribute this 3, which, if you recall, means we're going to multiply it by each term in the parentheses. So I'm going to take 3 times t, which is 3t, and I'm going to add that to 3 times 1, which is 3. And then I'm going to write the rest of my equation, which is minus 4t is greater than or equal to negative 5. Now I want to combine like terms. So as you can see, I have a positive 3t and a minus 4t. So that gives me a minus 1t or just a minus t. Bring down the rest, plus 3 greater than or equal to 5. Now I want to undo the addition and subtraction. I'm going to subtract both sides by 3. So now I have negative t greater than or equal to, and this should have been negative 5. Negative 5 minus 3 gives me negative 8. And then I still have a negative in front of the t. So anytime we have a negative, hopefully you guys remember that what we want to do is we want to divide by that negative. So we want to divide by negative 1 to get rid of that negative sign. So if we divide by negative 1, they cancel because remember a 1 is implied in front of this t. So we're dividing by negative 1. We have t on the left side. We're dividing by a negative, so we have to flip the sign. And then negative 8 divided by negative 1 becomes positive 8. So t is less than or equal to 8. Now we're going to go back a problem to a is greater than or equal to negative 4. And we're going to graph it. Now, I think some of you are having a difficult time graphing negative numbers. Remember that a number line, you don't count. A number line means the lowest numbers are on the left and the highest numbers are on the right. So when we're counting up, we're going from left to right. When we're counting down, we're going from right to left. Some of you I have seen, I'm going to go into the top of the screen, have tried to create a number line when they're doing negative numbers, and for some reason do this when they have a negative number. That's not correct because negative numbers actually have a smaller value as they get larger. So negative 4 is over here and negative 2 is inside here. It doesn't go the other way. So when I have a is greater than or equal to negative 4, I draw my closed circle because it's equal to it. And then my arrow points the same way as the inequality. So that's how I would graph a is greater than or equal to negative 4. Let's look at two more examples here where we have variables on each side. These are going to be multi-step equations. In the first one, we have 6n minus 1 greater than 3n plus 8. I'm going to move the variables to the left in this case, so I'm going to subtract both sides by this n term. Okay, remember a term is any grouping of numbers that are being multiplied together. So 3n is a term. In order to move a term, you add or subtract it. So I'm going to subtract 3n from both sides, so I get rid of the n on this side. 6n minus 3n gives me 3n. I rewrite the rest of my equation. Minus 1 is greater than 8. Now I solve this like a regular two-step equation by adding 1 to both sides to get rid of this 1. So now I have 3n is greater than 9, and I divide both sides by 3 so that I get my answer of n is greater than 3. We then have this problem over here. So remember, we distribute first, we combine like terms second, we move the variables third, and then we do reverse order of operations last. So we have 18x minus 5 is less than or equal to 3 times the quantity 6x minus 2. So let's do the distribution first. So distribution says I got to multiply 3 by each term in the parentheses. I have 18x minus 5 is less than or equal to 18x. 3 times negative 2 gives me negative 6. I combine like terms, don't have any like terms to combine. Now I move the variable. So I want to move this 18x to both sides, or to the either side. So I'm just going to subtract it to move it to the left. So 18x over here cancels. 18x minus 18x actually cancels over here too. So now I'm left with the equation negative 5 is less than or equal to negative 6. Well, that doesn't make sense. Is negative 5 less than or equal to negative 6? No, negative 6 is less than negative 5. So remember, if we get something that doesn't fit, we are going to write no solution. All right, just a few more. We have a couple word problems to look at. In this problem, we have an isosceles triangle that has at least 2 congruent sides. So if you weren't sure what an isosceles triangle is, it just told you. So we know a triangle has 3 sides, so I'm just going to draw a triangle. We know 2 of them are the same, so I'm just going to label them with X for now. The perimeter, okay, which is, let me erase that. The perimeter tells us that we add each side up. So in this problem, we're going to have x plus x plus, what do we want to call this side? Let's call it B for the bottom side of the triangle. Plus B is at most 12 inches. So we want to write less than or equal to 12 because it can't be greater than 12. It is at most 12 inches. So it can't be greater than 12, so it must be less than or equal to it. And then it says the length of each of the 2 congruent sides is 5. Well, now it tells us the length of both of those sides. So now we have 5 plus this bottom side is less than or equal to 12. What are the possible lengths of the remaining sides? So now we're going to find B. So we have 10 plus B is less than or equal to 12. We want to subtract this 10 from both sides to isolate the variable. We're left with B is less than or equal to 2. So this bottom side has to be less than or equal to 2 inches. But what else does it also have to be? We haven't done these type of problems yet, but we can't have negative numbers when we're measuring something. So B also, so I'll teach you guys later how to write this better than just writing the word and, but for now, we're going to write and B has to be greater than or equal to 0 because it can't be a negative number. So B has to be somewhere between 0 and 2. All right, so that's a little curveball thrown into you there, but we will see those problems later. The student council, here's another word problem, and then we will wrap it up. The student council wants to rent a ballroom for the junior prom. The ballroom's rental rate is $1,500 for 3 hours. So we have $1,500 is how much we're going to start with. And just keep an eye on that. That's 3 hours of time. All right, and $125 for each additional half hour. I'm going to recommend that we write this as plus, that's what and is, $250 per hour. It's $125 for each half hour, which means it'd be $250 per hour. And the reason I'm using hours is because this here we decided to write in hours. So I'm going to keep everything in the same time frame. So I have 1500 plus 250H, and then it tells us that the student council raises 2125. So I know this is going to be somehow on the other side of my equation. And it wants to know what is the maximum number of hours for which they can rent the ballroom. So if I want to know the maximum number, I have to write less than or equal to here, because they cannot spend more than money they have, right? So the student council only has 2125. If I were to write greater than or equal to here, that would imply that the amount of money they spent on the rental rate is larger than the amount of money they have. The amount of money has to be less than or equal to the total amount of money, which is over here. So let's go ahead and solve this equation to find it out. We first subtract this 1500 because we're undoing addition and subtraction first. We have 250H is less than or equal to 625. We divide both sides by this 250. And we get H is less than or equal to 2.5. So what is the maximum amount of hours which they can rent the ballroom? It's not 2.5 if you said 2.5. H is 2.5. Remember, H is the additional time we spent above this $1,500. So H is 2.5, but we're also already paid for 3 hours. So the maximum number of hours would be 2.5 plus 3. Again, sometimes setting up the word problems we're going to get pretty good at, but what you need to learn to do is make sure you are answering the question correctly and not forgetting other parts. So we're not always just looking for the variable as an answer. This may be a trick question that they would put on a test to see how well you're reading a problem by giving 2.5, H is less than or equal to 2.5 as one of the multiple choice answers, because you would assume that you plug this into the equation, it would be right, but that's not the whole equation. What they are asking for is the total number of hours. We found the additional amount of hours by finding 2.5. Then we have to add that to the 3. So our answer would be the maximum amount of hours is 5.5. That's a tough question, but that's why we're going through it, so we can learn to identify these types of things in questions. All right, so don't forget, flip the inequality when you divide or multiply by a negative number, and follow the same steps as if you were solving an equation. Distribute, combine like terms, get the variable on one side, and then follow the reverse order of operations. If we do all that, inequalities are a piece of cake, and we're going to be moving on to the next new subject next lesson. Good luck, and I will see you guys in live class.